Are you a part of the 52% of the North American workforce who is burnt out and feels as if they've reached their wits' end at work? Well, according to Indeed.com, that figure is up by 9 percentage points from a pre COVID 19 survey. The job matching site reports that all employees of all ages and types are feeling the effects of stress, mental health challenges, and fatigue. Michael Levitt is on a mission to make sure that employees have a chance to minimize burnout and live a more balanced life. He's the founder and chief burnout officer at a San Diego and Toronto based burnout media firm. He's an in person and certified virtual speaker and best-selling author with one mission to ensure when you leave the office, your emotional and mental think tank is not drained. He joined me this week to have a discussion about avoiding burnout at work, inclusion, and diversity. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Michael, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm excited to talk to you all about creating a successful corporate culture. Great to be with you this morning, and thanks so much for being here.
I'm looking forward to this, and thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, Michael, before we dive into our conversation this morning, I'm not sure if you knew this, but October marks National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the importance of hiring individuals with disabilities and the impact they can have on the workforce.
It is critically important to make sure that as a society, we employ everyone and create ways to have things done and accessible for everybody. My youngest child is special needs. A cousin is very close to me, has special needs and some developmental disabilities. But and even as a young child, I always was thrilled when I'd go into an organization and see someone that, from a visible standpoint, you can see, okay, they've got some type of challenge or disability. And I was always thankful that organization, created opportunities or made sure that there were opportunities available. So I'm thrilled that this month recognizes that. And as time goes on and as careers and organizations go on, that they open it up, for more opportunities. Obviously, it's been a concern of mine, especially during this pandemic, that there may have been some roles that people that have some disabilities may not have been able to do because we were all sent home for the pandemic, and a lot of things haven't been open now that we're starting to see things open up again, and especially where we're both based out of in Ontario, there's more things open. So I'm really hoping that that things will start getting back to where everything is freely accessible for everybody, so we can make sure that everyone that wants to participate in the economy in an employment type of situation or just in life in general can without any restrictions or barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born with cerebral palsy, so it's something that is near and dear to my heart, and something that I think needs greater attention. So I appreciate you sharing that. And now I'm curious. I see your book behind you, and I know that you help people and in the corporate world avoid burnout and be engaged at work. So I'm wondering if you can tell me all about that and the great work that you do in that regard, Bonnie.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I do a lot of work in the burnout space. I've been speaking quite a bit over the last couple of years at conferences around the globe. And a lot of it, of course, virtual over these last 2 years because travel has been restricted because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But burnout was a problem we were seeing even before this pandemic, but unfortunately, it seems to be getting worse in many situations where people are burning out and they're just overwhelmed. And just to kind of frame this a little bit, I'll read for you the World Health Organization, which we've heard about a lot over the last couple of years with the pandemic. But prior to the pandemic, they had actually issued an ICD code around burnout because it's been such a huge problem globally. So I'm going to read the definition of burnout from the World Health Organization. Burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that is caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It happens when you're overwhelmed, you're emotionally and physically drained, and you're just not able to meet the demands that you're facing in life. And a lot of people have experienced that, again, even before the pandemic, but especially during this pandemic, for people that were working and they were working from home. And if they had children, well, guess what? They were also responsible for making sure their kid was doing online schooling. And, most of us know that typically most people work during the hours that our kids are in school. So you're trying to work, but you're also trying to make sure your kids are in school. Well, that's a challenge. That's really problematic. And so a lot of people were stressed about that. People were stressed about not being able to get certain things. Potentially, let's say, for example, you use some type of wheel-trans service or transportation service if you have a disability to get to and from places. Well, a lot of those places for a while were closed. So access to services was restricted for so many people. And I think a lot of people probably didn't even take that into consideration, thinking about, okay, restaurants weren't open, where, maybe once or twice a week, you reserve a transportation service to go have lunch in a restaurant. Well, for a good part of this pandemic, that wasn't an option. You could have delivery. Okay, that's great. But, to get, out to your front door to get, pick up delivery and all that stuff, these are all little nuances of challenges that society may not be fully aware of. And again, it's been a challenging and stressful time for everybody. And that's why we're seeing a lot more stress, a lot more prolonged stress, which unfortunately turns into burnout. So the work that I do, again, is, speaking at conferences and working with some organizations to help make sure that their team understands what burnout is so they can start making some changes to prevent it from continuing, and then hopefully learn how to prevent burnout ultimately from ever happening in your life again.
And as we start to see things open back up, Michael, I'm wondering if you could share with me your ingredients for creating a positive corporate culture, because I know you have some thoughts around that area as well.
Definitely communication and being open and transparent of where things are. Yes, there's certain things that an organization probably shouldn't share with other employees, but they're very few. Share, the challenges the organization is having, the concerns. Um, Open things up for ideas, because as a CEO, I only see things from my vantage point. I don't see necessarily from the front lines unless I go down there and actually pay attention and see what's going on. But I need the people that are working in the various levels of an organization to let me know what they see. What are the customers asking for? What are some challenges? What are some things you're dealing with that are problematic? What are some things that are bugging you, or maybe there's a situation where your desk or your work area isn't as comfortable as it could be, or you have to take extra steps to grab things where, okay, if we reconfigure an area a little bit, it may make it easier to access certain things and grab things, which can save maybe 30 seconds or a minute. It's like, well, that 30 seconds isn't that big of a deal. But if you're grabbing that particular file or going to that particular cabinet 20 times a day, well, there's 10 minutes. Again, 10 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, but that's 5 days a week. That's 50 minutes. It's almost an hour. These little things that you can adjust to make things a little bit more efficient for people makes things easier. And you wouldn't know about that unless you ask. And sometimes people, they don't even think about it. They just, well, I have to go over there. Well, how often do you go over there? 20 times a day. If it was closer, what would that give you? Give you some extra time to focus on some other things. And it's those types of things that we have to take a step back and look and see how things are. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we see in workplaces and society today, besides the communication and the lack of trust that seems to be permeating there, is we're going at such a rapid pace, we don't slow down to actually look and see what we're doing. It's as if we're working with our eyes closed, and because we've done it this way for so long, but there's opportunities to see, okay, is there a way to make this easier for us to do this so we can serve the customer? And if you find some efficiencies that way, then it tends to reduce the strain and stress that so many people face.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about moderation and managing your time. I mean, there's always things to do, but there's never enough time in a day, right?
Exactly. Well, that's one of the things that we've seen during this pandemic is, and the study was done in America, but I've seen statistics across, different parts of the world, and I'm sure Canada would be in the same boat, is Americans on average during the pandemic were working 20% more hours a day before or since the pandemic. And I'm thinking, okay, where did you find that time to work extra hours? Because a lot of people were working long hours anyway. But what had happened was when people were working from home instead of going to work, that commute time, so, getting up in the morning and, turning on Tecumseh and, heading towards, Devonshire Mall or something like that, you're not doing that now. You're staying home. So that time you took to get ready, get dressed, get cleaned up, go to work, well, you're staying home. So that's why people, were basically staying in their pajamas and working unless they were going on a Zoom call. And then, of course, maybe they put on some work clothes. But that time that they used to use for getting ready, they just started working. And they were working longer hours and into the evening and on weekends. And that's why we're seeing, a lot of challenges and stress and people thinking about leaving their jobs because it's just a bit overwhelming to them. And unfortunately, in many of those organizations, they don't feel comfortable sharing that it's a problem with their bosses because they're afraid to lose their job. And I get it. It's never fun to be in that situation where you're unemployed. But at the end time, you also have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure that your well-being is preserved first, because if you don't take care of yourself, then you're not going to be able to do a good job at work, and you're not going to be able to take care of, loved ones or meet the needs of things that you need to do.
Absolutely. And Michael, we talked earlier about this being National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So I'm also curious to get your definition of diversity and inclusion at work. What do you think that looks like on a broader scale when we talk about folks with disability, ethnic groups, people that may uh, have a different perspective? How do you think diversity and inclusion should be defined at work?
For me, the best way to define it is make sure that your workplace, if at all possible, mimics what your community looks like. I was fortunate when I worked in the medical field, was running a clinic in Toronto, And in that particular clinic, the physicians and the staff that worked there spoke 16 different languages. They were from around the globe, male, female. There may have been, I'm not sure, someone that was transgender or non-binary identifying. Uh, it was representative of our community in that area, and it happened naturally. It wasn't a case where, okay, let's look and hire somebody that is from India or Pakistan or Ghana or the Middle East or things like that. It happened naturally because we were in an environment that people would look at and say, wow, you've got a lot of different representation here. And that means, okay, that is a safe place for me to go. Because ultimately, with inclusion and diversity, you want to feel safe. You want to have an environment that feels safe for people, no matter what their background is, their gender, how they identify, whatever type of potential challenges they may face in life or disabilities. You want them to feel welcome in a place that they can contribute however they can. And when you have an environment like that, that's when I like to say magic happens. That's when you see some great things come from that company or that organization because we're learning from each other. I'm very thankful that I've had the opportunity to work in different industries that had completely different cultures from when I grew up. And because it helped me, number one, expand my taste buds and eat some absolutely amazing foods whenever we had like a potluck lunch or something like that. All of a sudden you're having foods from 20 different countries. You're upset because you can't eat it all because you would get literally sick to eat all that food at the same time. But it gives you exposure and you seek to understand point of views and perspectives from different vantage points. And again, that's what inclusion is. That's what diversity is. You want that in your company because that's what the world is. The world is not one shade. It's, a bunch of shades. As a kid, I used to, refer to the world as a box of Crayola crayons. They have them in 64, 128. I think they've got even more colors in their crayon boxes now. Well, that's what the world looks like. And not only are the different colors, there's different skill sets and backgrounds and perspectives and experiences. And when you put all of those things together, you create things that you wouldn't be able to create if you didn't have that type of environment. So that's why I'm so imperatively thrilled to see organizations do that and do it naturally and not have it be, okay, this is our policy. We're going to do this, which is great. I'm not diminishing that. But when you have an environment that naturally has that in place, it just makes it such more fulfilling to be a part of that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, I always say that life is a constant game of networking and learning, right? Because
Mhm.
no matter how much schooling you have or life experience,
Mhm.
someone can always teach you a new lesson, right?
Absolutely.
So, and Michael, I'm curious, just before we leave the topic of inclusion and diversity, I'm addressing a group of vocational rehabilitation professionals and job coaches at the beginning of next month. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on the message you would give to those professionals about the importance of the work that they do specifically in helping to find individuals with disabilities employment.
I think the biggest thing for those leaders to look at is to look at things differently as far as what the job description is and what the work needs to be done and be open to modifying things. One of the things, and this a boss of mine that I had decades ago, 2 decades ago. I'm still alarmed that it's been that long ago, but it was my first day working for this organization, and my boss's name was Rick. And he came up to me in my cubicle at 3:32 p.m. I remember this specifically that time because I looked at the clock. It was my first day, and he said, "Okay, I just want to lay down the ground rules." And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go. Here comes the boss, laying down the law and saying what would happen and how I'm supposed to do work." He leaned in and he says, "I don't care when you get here. I don't care when you go home. As long as you get your work done, everything will be good. If you need me, you've got my pager number." That's how long ago it was. And my cell phone number. I'm here on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I'm in the East Coast on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I'm always reachable. I'm not going to bug you at night or on weekends uh, unless there's an emergency. And he defined what an emergency would be. But otherwise, if you need anything, let me know. And I worked for that organization for years and turned down offers for better pay at other places because it allowed me to be creative in the work that I do. So, to answer your question, create roles where people can be creative. And yes, there's certain jobs that need to be done. Great, we'll let them get done, but let them be creative in how they do it. And when you do that, you'll find in many cases that people that are allowed to be creative will do something better than you could ever do as a leader. And I think that's a big lesson to learn is, the roles. People that have some disabilities do not prevent them from being able to do the job. There's so many roles out there in offices and all kinds of different places where people that have any type of disability under the sun can still participate and still be a valuable member of your organization. So take advantage of that and create opportunities for those people because it makes the world so much better.
And it also gives companies a competitive advantage, doesn't it?
It does because again, you bring in different perspectives and you look at different ways of things, and I know that like in Ontario, for example, and I know we have a bigger audience than just Ontario, but I'll talk about Ontario for a moment with the Accessibilities Act and making sure that there was ways to access things. Something that was always on my mind even before I started working and being part of any committees that looked at accessibility issues and things like that, where I would notice, even though thankfully I don't have any type of physical disabilities. I remember going into a coffee shop in Windsor, and the bathroom door was tight for me to get in. And I'm thinking, okay, if I'm in a scooter or a wheelchair, there's no way possible that I can use this washroom. And I thought, this is not right. This needs to be reconfigured. And of course, that coffee chain, pretty big one in Canada, not going to mention because they're not a sponsor, but they bulldozed that location and built up a new one, which was fully accessible. And I think, that's something long term that every organization needs to look at when they hire people with disabilities to see, okay, let's make this accessible for everybody. And when you do that, it just makes it better for everyone involved and includes everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, and we've talked about leadership a lot, and I know that you have the Breakfast Leadership Network. So I'm wondering if you can tell me the mission behind that endeavor.
Yeah, for me, when I launched the organization, I wanted to address burnout with C-suite executives. And as I worked with those, I realized that burnout wasn't just exclusive to them. It was permeating through the entire organizations that I'd worked with. So, I opened things up a little bit, and the network component of it is because one, I speak around the globe. I have the Breakfast Leadership Show. I create a ton of content on the website, publish books, of course, and do all kinds of different coaching and speaking type of things as well. So, and I have several organizations participate with that and contributors that create content for the show as well as for articles and whatnot. But with the main purpose to help organizations be better at what they do, to not say take shortcuts, but at least do some things to make things easier for everybody that works there. When you make things easier at work, it reduces the stress. If you don't have prolonged stress, you can't burn out. So there's a lot of method to the madness on it, but it's a fun ride. I enjoy the work that I do, and I get to talk to amazing people like yourself about what I do.
Yeah, absolutely, and spreading the word and the impact, because you never know what group of people are listening, right?
Absolutely. I had an article published in a magazine last year, and then a large insurance organization reached out to me, and I helped their sales team with some stress and burnout situations. And it was just because I was interviewed in a magazine. And I had not heard of this particular organization before, so it wouldn't have been necessarily on my radar to reach out to them. But they found me, and that's very thankful. That's why I love opportunities like this to be able to talk to you and your audience and help in any way that I can. And that's my servant attitude is okay. How can I help people? And if you help enough people, it makes the world better. And that's my way of making a dent in the universe.
And Michael, there's nothing wrong with paying it forward for other people, right? Because
Absolutely.
the rewards you get will multiply if you help somebody else, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The ripple effect of helping one person, you're helping more than one person. You're helping everybody that's involved in their life, which helps their lives. It's amazing, what kind of an impact that we have, each of us. And and
Abs-
and
yeah,
keep that in mind. Yeah.
absolutely. And Michael, I'm curious to ask you, how do you define a good leader, whether it be corporate or business? What do you think makes an effective leader when you're the CEO of a franchise or a company?
For me, a big leader or a great leader is one that listens to their team. They be as open, as transparent as they can, um, own mistakes if they make them, praise publicly, and correct, or I don't say discipline, but if there's issues that need to be addressed, you do that privately. You don't embarrass anybody in front of anyone else, but you praise them if they do something really well, and you praise everybody, and because everyone is doing the best that they can. And when you acknowledge that, it reinforces this is the environment we want to have. Um, Leaders set the tone. Leaders set the culture of organizations, and when you have the right people in place, the power of what you can do is just multiplied so much. So create an environment that is going to be successful and lead by example, and everything else kind of falls in line.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, as a speaker yourself, I'm curious to ask you about the best point of impact you can make with an audience that you're speaking to. And what I mean by that is, once you're done to speak, what do you hope in terms of impact that you leave with the audience that you're speaking to?
Yeah, since most of my talks either are around burnout or workplace culture, both of them have one key point is my hope is that someone will take away something I said. Doesn't have to be the entire talk. It can be one moment, one suggestion, one idea that they can take back to their home or to their workplace or both, and implement that one thing that will have a ripple effect that will positively impact their life. I always give a ton of content and ideas for people to go with, knowing that no one's going to implement everything, but if they do one of those things, it can make things a bit easier for them. And if you can ease the pressure that life provides us just a little bit, then my mission was accomplished. So that's always my goal, is to leave somebody with something. And every time I get feedback from talks, I get a ton of feedback of, I love how you said this, or I love that exercise, or when you said that, it made me realize that I needed to do this. And that's the intent, is I want to leave people with some ideas of things that they can do to make things just a bit easier for them and the people they work with and the people they love.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, I'm curious for you, what's the best part about living life personally?
Living life to its fullest, having the autonomy to do what you want, when you want, and where you want. That's freedom. Yes, having a ton of money can help things, but it can also create problems too. But I think ultimately being able to live life on your terms and designing the life you want, everybody has that opportunity. A lot of people say, no, I don't, but actually you do. You do. You think about, okay, what is my ideal life? What would that look like? What would my Thursday morning look like if I design my ideal life? And what would I be doing? Design it and then figure out where you're at now and connect the dots. Okay, what do you need to do in order to live that ideal life? What adjustments do you need to make? Maybe it requires looking for a job that's a little bit better for you, or making some changes in how you do things, or eating better, or getting better sleep. There's all kinds of ways to look at it, but ultimately, map out what you want your life to look like and revisit that map, because sometimes life changes and that it's no longer fits. I want to do something different. Guess what? It's your life. You can do whatever you want if you map it out and do things. So that's my idea anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, you told me before this started that you're coming to me this morning from Toronto. So I'm wondering what's the best part about being part of the Canadian fabric specifically?
Wow. Just one there, because I'm originally from the US. I'm a dual citizen. I immigrated to Canada in 2004 and became a citizen in 2011. So been a Canadian citizen for a decade now, which again is mind-boggling. It's again already been a decade. But I think the one of the biggest things, and of course, growing up across the border from Windsor, I had exposure to Canada long before I became a citizen. But I think the fabric of our country is as diverse as it is there is a unifying theme to it, and it's making sure that everybody is taken care of. We want the best for people. Um, Competition, sure, that's great. If we start talking about hockey teams or sports teams, yes, if you go across the country, there's some debate on who's better and who's not. But ultimately, I think Canadians as a whole want the best for everybody, and we want to have access to opportunities to be the best for ourselves. And this country provides that. We've seen some amazing growth in this country from a population standpoint, from opportunities, all kinds of different things. And I trust that it will continue. And I hope that all of us from our diverse backgrounds from all over the globe will continue to make this country a place that people want to come to in spite of the winters. Um,
No kidding. I'm born and bred Canadian myself, and it gives me 80 degrees and sunny. And I always tell people when I travel to the States, because my dad's American, that being Canadian, we value summer more than most people. So there you go.
Yes, we do. We definitely value those 2 weeks of summer that we get. Yes, that's a little bit longer than that, but when it's wintertime, it certainly feels like it was only 2 weeks. That's for sure.
That's exactly right. And Michael, you sparked me to ask you this one final question before I get to my last question. How do
Mhm.
you think we can achieve again societal unity and come together and not be so divisive? I'm curious to get your answer to that question.
Yeah, especially if we look to our neighbors to the south, it definitely appears that they are pretty divided on things. And I think the best way to approach it is, and I tell people to do this all the time, seek to understand the other person's point of view without judgment, without condemnation, without accusing them of being anything other than, why is that important to you? Because if you peel back the layers of differences of opinion on any particular subject, whether it's politics, vaccines, whatever the case may be, seek to understand the person's point of view. Okay, why do you feel that way? Why is that important to you? And not in a judgmental way, but in a, I want to understand, from your perspective, why you feel this way about this particular situation. When you do that, you'll find that there's a lot of commonality. Even though there might be a difference of opinion, there's some common elements to it. And I know in working with people that we're a lot more common than different. Even if you're liberal or conservative or NDP or Green Party or whatever, there's a lot more in common than different. Ultimately, is figure out what those commonalities are, focus on those, and then those other areas where we have difference opinion, talk about that, talk them out, again, in a non-judgmental, confrontational, sensational way. When you can have a conversation that way with somebody that has a different point of view, you may never agree on it, that's fine, but at least there won't be this animosity and this pent-up frustration that we see so much, at least on social media and what we see in the media. When you're having those coffee shop conversations, though, with people, and you're doing it in a non-judgmental way, that's what I hope is what is actually, going on in life, and not this in your face, trying to get ratings on the news type of thing that we see, unfortunately. I think we have a lot more in common than not. So focus on those commonalities, and then we can work on our differences in other areas. And when we do that, again, with a purpose of seeking to understand, I think the world will be a whole lot better.
Yeah, it all starts with conversation, doesn't it? You know,
Absolutely.
you don't always have to agree, but you have to seek to understand. So,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Hey, Michael, my other question for you is I'm curious to ask you about how you want your personal or professional legacy to be defined, and if people want to connect with you, what's the best way they can accomplish that goal?
Yeah, for me, on my personal or professional legacy, I think ultimately it would be a case of, okay, here's somebody that cared, that wanted the best of people and wanted to make sure that everyone had a fair chance at doing and living life the way that they wanted to live, and bringing awareness to certain challenges, ideas to make life easier for people, because life is challenging. There's no getting around that. But if there's something that I do in life that makes things easier for someone or a group or people or society, then again, mission accomplished. So that's my legacy that I hope to leave. And as far as finding more about me, breakfastleadership.com is a great place to start. On most of the social media channels as well. You can look under the letter B and then Fast Leadership, or just Google Breakfast Leadership. You should be able to find me on most of the social media channels, and more than happy to have a conversation with you.
Well, Michael, I'm thrilled and delighted that you agreed and accepted the invitation to have a conversation with me.
Oh, I
Uh, and
appreciate
I
it.
and I want to thank you for your time, energy, and effort on my behalf, and for being here this morning. It's most appreciated.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Really enjoyed our conversation today.